Hola, hola a todas, hola a todos. Bienvenidos a una nueva edición de VOR OnLive. Como ya saben, VOR es, en la navegación aérea, un VOR es un mecanismo que emite señales para mantener al piloto en el camino correcto. En ese sentido, en CENTRO, VOR son una serie de diálogos e intervenciones que buscan explorar y buscar soluciones para diferentes problemas por medio de la creatividad. Hoy tenemos el privilegio, la oportunidad de contar con dos personas muy interesantes para que hablemos de dos intersecciones muy importantes para CENTRO. Por un lado, la moda y el diseño, y por otro lado, la sustentabilidad. Tenemos a dos personas muy especiales. Primero, pues, obviamente, voy a cambiarme a inglés para presentarlos, para que demos paso a la conversación. Firstly, I would like to welcome you all to VOR OnLive. And I'm sure that we're going to have an amazing conversation with a lot of interesting points to make. And firstly, I would like to join Mónica Mendoza. She is the head, the chair of textile fashion design at CENTRO. So there she is, Mónica.
Hi, Don.
Hi. And we also are very privileged to have, this is our second collaboration, but Mónica will talk more about that in a second, with Andrew Olah. He is the founder, one of the founders of Transformers Foundation and the Kingpins show. So I'm sure we're going to talk more about those projects, and he'll probably be here any second. But how are you doing, Moni? Oh, there's Andrew.
Oh, good. Hi, Andrew. How are you?
Well, welcome to VOR OnLive. We're very lucky to have you. We're very privileged to have this conversation with you. I'm sure that it's going to be very inspiring. We're going to give us a lot of knowledge, but also a lot of hope, I'm sure, for the future. But thank you both, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gon. Hola, Andrew. I'm gonna say something real quickly in Spanish before I officially introduce you to our audience. Gracias, buenas tardes a todos. Gracias a los que están conectados. Es un placer tenerlos con nosotros. Les quiero platicar rapidísimo que esta conversación, además de ser un VOR, que son conversaciones que ya conocen, es una conversación que se da en el marco de una colaboración muy importante y con la que estamos muy emocionados con Transformers Foundation, con nuestra primera edición de Transformers en español. Al terminar el evento les vamos a dejar un link por si se quieren registrar las conversaciones que tenemos previstas para los próximos 2 días, pero ahora con Andrew platicaremos un poco más al respecto. So thank you, Andrew, for your time, generosity, and for joining us. As Gonzalo mentioned, Andrew is the founder of Kingpin Shows, which is one of the most important, if not the most important, trade show in denim for the denim industry, as well as the founder of Transformers Foundation. But probably before we start our presentation, I think it would be nice, Andrew, if we can give our audience a little bit of context about your career, your experience, and what you do in these 2 incredible projects.
Okay, thank you. I started working part-time in the textile business in 1973 and full-time in 76. So I have a lot of years in this business. And I've been specifically involved in the denim or indigo fabrics and fabrics for jeans since 1977. So it's a really, really long time. And I spent, just to talk about academics for a second, I spent 15 years working collaboration with FIT, producing a course on a jean brand, which we did for a long, long time. And yeah, so that's the history. I started Kingpins in 2004. There was no denim supply chain show at the time. And so we started it. We started it in New York, and we did shows everywhere when we started. We did them in India. We did them in China. We tried as many places as we could to see how it's going. And today we have shows, well, when there were shows, we have 2 in New York, 2 in Amsterdam, 1 in Hong Kong, and 2 in China. And I think next year we're going to do something in Latin America, maybe Mexico. So
nice. And now we have a digital version, right?
So we're starting with the digital version, and it's coming in the fall. And so that's that. And one of the things when we did shows, from the beginning of the shows, I always thought it was interesting that the customers think they know a lot. And the industry who produces it actually knows a lot. I mean, who could possibly know more about weaving than a weaver? I know this sounds crazy, but who could possibly know about dyeing denim more than a denim dyer? And so on. As a farmer knows more about cotton than other people. But the industry was always represented by NGOs, by writers in the BBC, or writers in the or commentary on CNN. And those writers, as I got going in the business, I realized those writers didn't know very much at all, and they would call people. So they never really knew, but they were the ones writing, and a lot of people read that, thought that was a fact. So we started doing more and more work in teaching with people from the industry, telling the audience what was true and what wasn't true about the industry, and what could be done and what wasn't being done. And we focused on sustainability. And one of the things that happened almost at every conference was the conference would always end, and people were kind of sad because they knew all the problems, but nothing was being done. So we got kind of tired of that, because it's tiring just to talk about a problem. Eventually you want to solve it. So we decided in 2019 to start a foundation. And it was actually officially started. Transformers Foundation was originally started last 2020 January. And that's what I've been working on partially every day since it started, with a group of people.
Thank you, Andrew.
People.
No, I really want to use this opportunity to thank you, and also to let our audience know how important I think this project is, because it's not always easy to get in touch with the people working in the actual industry. And you have brought to the table such important conversations with a lot of people who really matter at what's going on in the evolution of this industry. And I think that the work that you're doing at putting all of these sources of information and all of this knowledge to the service of younger generations is, I believe, an outstanding legacy, I would say, to textiles, to fashion, but also to mankind, to be honest. And I think is something that for me has become incredibly important, and I'm thankful for that. So before we officially start, I just want to remind our audience that our chat is open in the different social media platforms. So do join with your questions so that this becomes a true conversation as opposed to a monologue from Andrew and myself. So whatever you want to know about the denim industry, about fibers, about cotton, about any single question you can think of, please ask them. I can guarantee you that there are very few people in the world that know as much about denim as Andrew does. So please ask your questions. So I let you do it, Andrew. I think we can start the presentation. And as we move along, we'll ask all of our Q&A questions from the audience.
Please feel free, Monica, also to interrupt me anytime if something is interesting or you have a question or comment. So, as I mentioned, we started the foundation in 2020. In January, we got granted our IRS status to be a nonprofit, which takes a long time, but we got it, and we've been working since then. We can go to the next slide. So who are we? We are the denim, and we're proud of it. We are the denim manufacturing industry. So our founders are two farmers who grow cotton, one in the United States, one in Australia, a chemical company in Germany. I'm not going to list all of them, but there are garment factories, there are denim producers, there are laundries, and there are machinery producers. So as a group, we think Lycra has just joined us as well. So that's a synthetic fiber company. So we're pretty happy that we have a group together that represents the manufacturing of jeans together. Next slide, please. Well, the fundamental reason, and we can go backwards for 1 second. The fundamental reason of why we started was because the industry is taking too long to be green. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think one of the reasons is because there's not anyone pinning the industry to actually do something. Promises can be made that are not necessarily going to happen, but sound great. And there's a lot of information that is basically not to be trusted. For instance, if someone says they're going to do something by 2040 or 2050 or 2030, we don't know if they're going to do that or not. They say it, and we hope they do it, but we don't know. For instance, I give you a perfect example. In the Climate Control Accord, in the whole world, when a country says they're going to meet certain goals by a certain year, it takes 2 years to actually calculate the results. So if someone says they're going to do something by 2020, we're not going to know because the statistics we're just getting now are for 2019. So it takes years to actually calculate the impact, and then we find out they didn't meet it. So this is even worse in business. So we wanted to be involved because we want to help the industry understand what is successful, celebrate the best in class, and also be aware of what's not working. Sorry.
I want to ask you something on this regard. What is it taking on your from your end to have companies join the work that you're doing? Because I am convinced that there are many companies out there doing things the right way, but also for each company that is doing things the right way, you also have companies who are probably doing too little. So from the work that you're doing at the foundation, how is that going?
Well, you know, the fundamental problem is that, how do I describe this? I think the fundamental problem is that there are movements that people will eventually join. And the most popular movements are the movements that don't do very much. They sound great, they're marketed well, and they sound great. So I'm not going to criticize here any particular movement, but there are different movements that have occurred that everybody signs up for, and I'm not sure they have impact. Impact to me, which is what we're all looking for, means you have statistics to show exactly what you did. And this is one of the things that through my whole conversation with students everywhere that I talk about, is unless you have facts, then everything you hear just sounds good. Like, for example, someone says, oh, he's the best parent. How do you decide that? But if you say they're the best student, we know because there's a score. So I think that the problem in our industry is that very much of the conversation is in adverbs and adjectives and not in data. And I'm a big believer, and our foundation is a huge believer and supporter of data. So that's, I think, the biggest issue. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely.
Okay. Can we go to the next slide? So, what is sustainability? I was thinking about how to explain this the best way because it's a complicated answer because there's no facts. But let me give you an example of a perfect case. I'm Canadian, and we make a lot of evergreen trees that are used for Christmas trees. A lot in Canada. A lot. And we sell them to the United States. We sell them all over the place. I have never once heard in Canada that we're short of Christmas trees. So why would that be? How can somebody have a business that is so good, growing so many things every year, and then every year they have more? Never seem to have a need for more. There's never an article on shortage of Christmas trees in Canada. Well, the answer is many, many years ago, the decision was however many they sell, they plant, I don't know what number, maybe 2 times more every year. So it's replaced, and what's used is replaced. And that's the best definition of sustainability, that we as either consumers or as a business, that in the perfect world, we wouldn't take anything away from the earth. We would simply replace it. And that's the best description I can. Now that's very hard, for instance, for Apple to produce an iPhone, or very hard for a company that makes glasses, that they can replace everything they take out of the world. They use energy, they do a lot of different things. So industry has a really hard time in doing that. So that's my definition of sustainability, but there are specific points that we're most concerned about. The first one, if we can go to the next slide. The best description I ever heard of this is, imagine for instance, Monica, that you have a temperature. You have 1 Celsius temperature higher than you should have. how would you feel? You would feel uncomfortable. You wouldn't be unable to work. You wouldn't be unable to do anything that you do, but you would feel lethargic. You would feel a little hot or cold. You would feel definitely not well. And that's the Earth. The Earth today is too hot, just like a human being with a temperature. Now, we have all sorts of politicians and all sorts of people that say, oh yeah, it's a problem, but well, they're just treating the Earth as if it has a person with 1 degree too high Celsius temperature. So that's where we are. And so we have an attempt, we're trying very hard to deal with this through the denim industry. The denim industry is one tiny segment, but we're working really hard in the industry to help avoid this problem. Next slide, please. Well, I used to give this story that Michael Jordan, when he played basketball, the jerseys that were made that had Michael Jordan's number will not decompose for 2,000 years. Every football jersey that anyone wears, it doesn't matter if it's American football or European football, every jersey from baseball, everything that's made from a synthetic doesn't decompose and never will. So where do you put it? I showed at one of our shows once a video that was on YouTube, and you can look it up. It's cute. It's about the invention of plastic. It was in the 40s or the 30s. I can't remember when it was, but they were so excited, and they showed pictures of all sorts of things made from plastic, how great it is, the inside of cars and all these things. But what they forgot to mention is that every single thing they produce was never going anywhere. Now, if you think about that, of every single plastic that ever existed is still around in one way or another, in the ocean, in the underground. It's just a big mess, and that's just plastics. We have clothes, we have furniture, we have one of the big problems that Greenpeace is looking into is computers and phones. I mean, can you imagine how many phones are replaced and thrown around in the world? If we talk about China or India or America, it's incredible. So we have too much garbage, and there's no real plan of how to deal with that garbage other than bury it or whatever they can do with it.
Yeah, and I think also thinking about topics like this makes us think of innovation in a completely different way and under a different light. So we tend to believe that innovative things are always a great thing, but we also, I think, get an invitation to reflect a little bit more on the side problems or parallel issues that very often innovation brings to the table.
Well, one of the beautiful things, and I have a slide for this later, is how you can take garbage and make it new again. And I always joke that I never knew as a kid that the garbage was worth my while. Go in the garbage and pull out stuff from my parents' garbage and then figure out how it could be used for something else. But that's what people are doing today. And that's a big element of our future for our Earth, is to reuse garbage. And we'll talk about that in a bit.
Correct.
But also, I have to say, you can avoid garbage in the manufacturing. So if you manufacture anything, whether it's a garment or whether it's a computer, if you manufacture it in a way thinking about what's going to happen to it the minute the person's finished with it, and you have that in mind, then the best products are products that deal with that.
Yeah, I actually want to use this opportunity that we're discussing the topic of garbage, because someone in our audience, Ever, is asking, what do you consider is the biggest waste threat to be in the manufacturing of denim?
The biggest waste?
The biggest waste in denim manufacturing.
There's a lot. We can start from the beginning. One of the things that blows my mind, and if you think about it, it's crazy. Let's start from the beginning of the supply chain. Every 500 pounds of cotton is wrapped in a polyethylene bag that never decomposes, and then it's strapped. So that's the fiber. Every polyester bale is done the same way. So every fiber comes in basically in plastic, some sort of a polyethylene or something like that. Every roll of fabric is in polyester or some kind of element of it. Miguel Sanchez can tell you exactly what the chemical compounds are. I'm not. But I can tell you that with all the packing in our industry is no one has any answer for it. They just pile up. So that starts there. And then we have all sorts of waste that comes out of the production of our business, like, for instance, indigo sediment or chemistry waste. We have waste of bad quality that in the factories they don't know what to do with. That's probably more easily used than a bag. And then we go through used garments and garments that didn't sell. And then we have some things that are biodegradable and some things that are not. So once again, when we get into synthetic fibers or we get into stretch fibers, we have a problem with either taking it out of the garment so that you could deal with it or using it. So it's a bit complex. So there's a lot of waste in a lot of places.
Yeah, and I think this is also the reason that it's very important. I was telling students that this morning during our Transformers Ed first session, that I think this is the reason that it's very important to become educated in different processes throughout the supply chain, because creating something these days is not exclusively about putting out in the world a beautiful object. It's about minding about what happens at different stages in the manufacturing process.
Yeah,
and I think the more we learn about these things, the more we get acquainted with terminology, with the processes, with the technologies, and the list could continue. I think the better solutions we'll be able to provide as we move forward.
Yeah, for instance, as an example, cotton bales used to be wrapped in cotton. And fabric used to be wrapped in cotton, but people didn't want to do it because it gets wet. People didn't want to do it because it's expensive and plastic's cheap. But plastic, when someone says something is cheap, they're actually not considering the end of life cost. So this is something which is also interesting because we calculate costs based on the initial cost, but we don't calculate the after cost. For instance, if you buy a computer, you pay for what it costs to make it, plus the company's profit, plus the retailer's profit, but you don't pay for getting rid of it. You just toss it in the garbage like it's nothing. But someone has to actually deal with that. And that should probably be in the cost of the goods.
Absolutely. I think we could spend a full session talking about that.
Yes. We did a session for 5 hours on garbage, definitely.
Absolutely. We can probably go to the next slide, and if you in our audience have more questions about this, we can answer them later in the conversation.
So I have a slide at this later on in the presentation, but not every country has the same amount of water. So for example, Canada has 88,000 cubic meters of water for every person, and Egypt has 10. So every country has a different story. I think Mexico also has issues with water. So every country has their own problems with water, but making jeans uses a lot of water, and that water is just wasted. I mean, it's changing. Our industry's changing, but this is what's been going on. Next slide, please. So, students out there, people watching this video out there, what can we do? Can we go to the next slide? You have a choice. You can ignore it, which a lot of us do. I mean, a lot of people, they read about this and they go, oh, it sounds terrible, and then they order another pizza. Because it really doesn't impact their life, and there's no clear place for them even to engage if they want to. But you can act, and the way you act is through the way you buy. Next slide, please. You have to buy sustainable, or at least try to buy sustainable. I'm not so sure it's easy. So buying sustainable, we'll discuss that now. Can we go to the next slide? I guess we have a movie here.
I think so.
Let's show this little movie. This is an old movie, but I love it. I hope you do.
Wear brown shoes after 6. Wear a hat indoors. Wear a short skirt after 40. Wear a short skirt if you're a man. Try too hard. Don't try it all. Dress like a girl. Dress like a man. Dress like a teen. Stand out. Blend in. Mix prints. Mix pink and red. Show your panty line. Go commando. Cover up. Show it all. Be trashy. Be neat. Wear pink, wear blue, wear yellow if you're blonde, wear red if you're a redhead. Wear socks and sandals. Look fake, look chic, look chic. Be a princess. Be boring. Take a stand. Be uniform. Be liberated. Be old. Be new. There are no rules in fashion, but one. Recycle your clothes.
So step one that we could all do is recycle. Take our old clothes and either reuse them, which you're going to show the next slide, but I'll do it now and we can skip that slide. We can either reuse them because we can fix them, or we can recycle them and give them to somebody else who will reuse them. But that's definitely a big opportunity for consumers to actually act and do something. Next slide, please. Yeah, reuse is nice. This is the way I grew up. When something was broken, we fixed it and we kept wearing it. Now it's a sign that you actually have interest in the environment when you do that. Not that you don't have any money or you have a problem and you can't afford something new. This is an attempt to, you can do all sorts of beautiful things when you reuse things, but reusing is a great opportunity for consumers to participate in sustainable behavior.
And I think in here we have the other video, correct?
Yeah.
Nunca vai ter uma peça tão... Preto. Este largo. Também faz parte da dificuldade.
E aqui é um furo.
Sabia agora. Sozinha, em casa da... Isso é o que está na amostra. Desculpe, não entendi. O que é que não vai ser para pegar aqui? Pode ser. Famosa fico. Tem? Já tira fora, tira fora.
It's a lovely video.
It is. And I think there is going to be a lot more going on in this regard. I mean, again, upcycling is a 10-hour conversation, separate conversation, but I think it's important to really follow different initiatives, upcoming designers and people who are trying to almost reverse engineer or kind of rethink the design process as opposed to the way that maybe traditional designers think about the creation of a product.
Mm-hmm. I agree. The other thing that consumers can do, we're still trying to go through that door of what can be done, is to actually start asking your suppliers or expecting your brands that you buy from or the stores that you buy from talk a little bit about energy, for example. Do they use renewable energy? Do they care? Do they not talk about it? Not talking about it tells you everything. But one of the goals for our industry is to use renewable energy, not non-renewable energy. So unless they're talking about it, then you should notice that. And the ones that do talk about it, you should give them preference from a sustainable point of view because they're doing something about a big subject. That's global warming and CO2 emissions. Next slide. Water. Now here is, I don't know if anybody can read that because even I can't read that, but this gives you an idea of different countries' water structure and how much water they have. Once you know how much water they have, it's really odd because the countries with the lowest amount of water tend to produce for the United States and for Europe. You can see in South America and Latin America that some countries have an amazing amount of water, like Paraguay and Costa Rica and Uruguay, so many, Bolivia, excellent amounts of water. But when you look at where the Americans buy their jeans, Pakistan has almost none. Not only does Pakistan not have none, but in the last 20 years, they have reduced their water table by almost 35–40%. So they're on a trajectory, they're on a mission to run out of water. India is more or less the same. Bangladesh is more or less the same. And if you see their water, if you can read this, and you compare it to, for instance, Canada or the United States, they have a fraction of what we have, but they're busy making jeans, they're busy using water, and it's a sad state of affairs. So I wanted to share that with everyone so that they understood that water plays a huge role. We're all going to need water in the long term, especially you and the young people. Next slide, please. Skepticism. Well, anybody who knows me really well says I'm very skeptical. I really don't like words like, this is better, this uses less, this is more, this is improved, this is green, this is sustainable. I don't see any facts in those words. I don't see any tests. I don't see any third party mentioning it, agreeing with it. I only see marketing campaigns. Marketing campaigns are manipulation. They're trying to make you buy something without any information. So I think it's really important as consumers that you all be skeptical. It's business after all. Business is in the business of making you buy their stuff. So as a consumer, I highly recommend that you start looking for facts. Next slide, please. This is one of my favorites. So there is a company in Austria called Lenzing, and they produce viscose and they produce Tencel. Maybe you guys have heard of it. I'm sure you've heard of viscose. And I went to visit the factory, and I was blown away because they showed me the factory and they showed me their little swans that were floating in the little rivers near their factory and how green they were. But it never really hit me until I asked them, well, what kind of energy do you guys use? And they said that 60% of this gigantic factory, I mean, it's gigantic, 60% of the energy to run that factory came from organic waste. That just blew my mind, that you could run a business on organic waste. And I laughed. I started to say to them, wow, that's a real opportunity for India and for China because they have so much garbage everywhere. And they said, no. It all depends on how you pick up your garbage. And then I realized my Canadian roots, because in Canada, we've been separating our garbage for almost 35 years. In my office in Toronto, 20 years ago, we had many different bins for different things. Some countries sort their garbage differently than other countries. So if you are a country, or if you're an state or any kind of municipality, and you sort your garbage properly, then you can actually take it and reuse it in lots of ways. The second thing that is really incredible is a friend of mine started a new denim mill. He's going to open, I think, in May. And denim requires a lot of water. And the reason denim requires a lot of water is because indigo can't be dyed one time. Where other colors are dyed one time, like green or blue or red, indigo is dyed 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. So it obviously uses 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times more water. But the way to solve this, as my friend discovered, is to use garbage water. So he doesn't pay for his water. He asks the city of Ho Chi Minh to send him their wastewater. They don't know what to do with it. What are they going to do with it? So other industries use fresh water. They make it filthy. And normally it will go back to somewhere to be cleaned and then dumped somewhere. My friend takes all that dirty water, says, don't clean anything. I'll clean it. He cleans it. And once it's clean, then he uses it for his factory. He uses it for all the industrial purposes that he needs. Then he cleans it again and he recycles it and keeps using it over and over again. So there is a solution to all these water problems. It's possible that industry could just buy water one time and keep using it over and over again. Of course, there's humidity and there's loss of moisture, but this is an incredible solution to our water issues, and it's available now. So I thought that was really interesting. The idea of garbage being reused is really joyful. Next slide, please. Well, I met a guy in 2005. How much time do I have? I'll be brief with this story. He used to make t-shirts.
I think we're good with time. Good. And we also have some questions that I want to ask. So I think you can take your time.
Okay. So my friend made t-shirts in Switzerland. He had a very big business in the Swiss market. I think he had a massive market share. And he decided he was going to sell his t-shirts. He made them in India. And he decided he was going to sell his shirts to Ferrari in 2004. And he went to Ferrari and he showed his t-shirts. And before he could hardly be sitting, I don't think they even brought him his coffee. They said to him, "Where's your cotton from?" And he said, "From India." And they said, "Where in India?" And they said, "Gujarat." And they said, "Where in Gujarat?" And my friend had no idea. He ran this big company, he had no idea. And he says, "Why do you ask?" And the guys from Ferrari said, "Well, everything in our car is transparent. We know where every part's from. We share it with our consumers. We tell you where the carburetor's from. We tell you where the engine's from, where the radio's from, where the tires are. Why is it a secret for you?" He said, "It's not a secret." He said, "I'm just stupid. I don't know. Nobody ever asked me before." And they said, "Well, we're not going to buy from anybody that doesn't know where the cotton is from." Well, I can tell you, none of us know where our cotton's from, anything we wear, ever. So we have yet to even start that process. But my friend taught me about that because he decided to make his cotton transparent. So the next year, what he did is he bought cotton seeds. He hired a bunch of farmers. He got a whole bunch of land together. He gave the farmers all the tools they needed to grow their crop. And he knew exactly where his cotton was from the next year. And he knew exactly what the environmental footprint was because he monitored everything. And the next year, he went back to Ferrari and said, "I know," or 2 years later, "I know exactly where my cotton's from. Can you think of me as a supplier again?" And this is transparency. Transparency, and I always say this, if you look where you're sitting right now around your room, there is not one thing in your room that you know where it's from. Not really. You don't know if there was slave labor used. You don't know if criminals were used. You don't know if anything you wear has hazardous chemistry in it. You have no clue about anything in the house. This is going to change, in my opinion. In the next 10 years, we're going to have, as a human right, the ability to go somewhere on a website and see exactly where everything's from, what it's made from, and its sustainable footprint. I don't care if it's apparel or it's any consumer good. A TV screen, it could be anything. But we have that right. Next slide, please.
I want to quickly ask you a question in that regard, Andrew.
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, I know for a fact that a lot of companies are really working hard to become as transparent as it possibly is. Mm-hmm. What do you think it will take for brands and companies to start being truly transparent? And second question, what's a way you believe to take that transparency to the level of farming that we were discussing this morning?
All right. The first question is, and Everlane was a perfect case. Everlane in America, and I don't know how many of the students know the company Everlane, but they are sort of transparent. They try to be transparent in a kind of easier way. Their business took a lot of business away from other people. Consumers, especially, for instance, when I taught my class, one of their favorite stores was Everlane, because the students could go online and see the factories where they were buying from and feel part of the process. Because Everlane's business was so good, other companies wanted to emulate it. So what will work and what will change the industry is successful brands and retailers that use transparency successfully to market more. And so it's up to consumers to buy those products, and that will just change the whole industry. As far as farming goes, it's possible in farming to track from the beginning everything that goes into a farm. I mean, even a very, very modest farmer who can't even write his name knows exactly what he spent for seeds, knows exactly what he spent for his fertilizer, knows exactly what he spent for his pesticide, and knows exactly how much he sold. The simplest person in the world knows those 4 things. The only thing that's missing is a data system to collect it and a verification that the person's information is correct. So we're able to do that today. It's in a big scale because there's 26 million cotton farmers, roughly. But I think that that's not something we should consider as not possible. Certainly possible in America today. In the bigger farm areas, it's really possible. It's certainly possible in Brazil. It's certainly possible in Australia. And we're getting to the point where if you don't do it, you seem to be hiding something, to me.
Thank you, Andrew. I think we have 2 or 3 more slides before we move to the biggest segment of the Q&A.
Okay, well, I'll go quickly. This is just a simple image. If you were walking in a park and you were really thirsty and you came upon a bench and that bench had a glass of water and you're really thirsty, would you drink it? Most people wouldn't because they don't know what's in it. And that's really the best message for transparency. Next slide, please. So to me, let's go to the left side. Non-transparency means that you're hiding component information or you don't know. That's kind of scary. Or no one knew the environmental impact, and that no one knows the choices made along the supply chain. And the contrary is true. Transparency means that you're giving access to all the inputs, you're proud of what you've done, and you're open and you're willing to share your supply chain, even to your competitors, and you're partnering with specific suppliers and you're willing to share that. You can see the difference between the two. Next slide, please. That's it. So, complete.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Before we move to the questions, just to remind you, even if this is a 1-hour conversation, it's never going to be enough time to discuss all the things that should be discussed about sustainability. I mean, we all wish that sustainability would be as easy as tagging a product with the word sustainability in it. But you know, this industry is too complex. Complex problems cannot be solved easily. And I think this is the reason that it's important to keep ourselves informed. So if you are in the audience and interested in learning more about technologies, new developments, social responsibility, and a bunch of things, we really invite you to join our conversations tomorrow morning and on Wednesday. That said, I'm going to start with a question from Alex, who says, when you speak of sustainability, do you also consider working conditions on the supply chain, particularly in poor countries? Are you advocating for changes in that regard?
Well, the first work that our Transformers Foundation did was a report on the abuse of garment factories and the workers during the start of COVID, when everybody canceled a lot of orders, which was in the newspapers all over the world. Our mandate for the foundation is to deal in sustainability, not human rights. There are many organizations that do a lot of great work in human rights. I'm not sure that anyone needs us to do that. But we do have interest in that, and we want to participate. And we think that a sustainable garment should be made under the conditions. We assume this is normal, of workers having decent treatment. We haven't made a statement on this, but I would imagine that we'd probably be super interested to follow workers making a real living wage versus a minimum wage, because there's a big difference between minimum wages and living wages.
Absolutely. And also from Alex, he's asking, what specific strategies would you suggest for recycling and reusing jeans?
What strategies?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I think we could discuss recycling and reusing as a general topic. I think it's not only jeans. There are many materials throughout the supply chain that could be either recycled or reused. So we can tackle a little bit of that.
I mean, you can basically, hopefully, buy from brands that want to take it back. I think that's a very attractive opportunity. Or you can simply pass it around and either fix it and wear it, or give it to other relatives and share it. I mean, I don't mean to make this a small thing, but to reuse and not buy new is great.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are out there. No, because what I want to say is there are a lot of complex solutions to reusing, recycling. So let's say like the one we saw on the video from Marine Ser, because he's working at a different stage, with factories to unsew the garments and create new patterns out of them. And that's like a completely different dynamic system that is required to be able to do something like that with great quality. But I think there are also a lot of simple actions at the citizen/consumer level that can be done, such as passing on clothes to someone else.
Yes. Yes, but actually recycling also means recycling it and to make it new yarn. So you can actually, there's a lot of interest today in recycled yarn and cotton. So you can take those jeans, you can break them up into little pieces, and they can be churned up and turned back into yarn. And today in Europe, they're more interested than Americans. Some brands are asking for 20% of the fiber in the product to be from recycled yarns. Now, also, there are technologies that can actually take a garment and liquefy it and turn it back into fiber. But we need a lot of garments for that. So there has to be, for these things to have scale, and I'm always about impact, for these things to have scale, we need to start returning a lot. Like not just one here and there, I mean a lot. And if we do that, then we can actually create a business out of it.
Yes, and I also think that recycling and reusing is a massive topic, because it also depends on the type of material. This morning we were talking with Rene from Lycra that some of the materials they're using now are recycled PET, but if you're talking about cotton, that's a different story. The way you recycle is different. It could be mechanical processes, it could be chemical processes. So it's again,
well,
10 different conversations in one.
When I taught at FIT, my students every year say, Mr. Olah, what can I do to be sustainable? And I used to always say to them, don't ever buy anything new. Do not buy new furniture. Do not buy new clothes. Do not buy new cars. Do not buy anything new except toilet paper and underwear. Everything you can buy used. And if we the governments don't want to hear that we shouldn't, as consumers, buy stuff. That's not really the idea from our economy. But the best thing we can do, the absolute best thing we can do, is don't ever buy anything new.
Yes.
I know that sounds crazy, but do you really need new?
Yes. I mean, overall, to be a lot more thoughtful about our shopping habits.
Right.
Because, never again buying anything, I think will sound very extreme to
very revolutionary.
But, even if you buy 1/3
exactly
the amount of things you typically buy because you're just used to it,
exactly.
that will make a difference. We are way too many inhabitants in the world, and we cannot continue to do things the way we've been doing them.
We have all sorts of used clothing places like Real to Real today that are really doing well by recycling and reusing old clothes that are thrown away by somebody that are beautiful to somebody else.
Agreed. Okay, so I have another question from Agath. She's asking if you're familiar with the Blue Jeans Go Green program in the US, recycling worn denim into insulation. Do you know any similar initiatives?
Well, old garments have been turned into insulation for a long time. So I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. It's it's a project that someone's doing, and it's great, but we need millions of them.
Yes. I have a question from Rebecca, and she's asking, what is the future of denim? And she says maybe 3D painting, but I don't know if we could talk about 3D painting, but I think you can definitely talk about technologies that are substituting laundry and dyeing traditional processes, let's say.
Well, first of all, 3D designing is gonna change the amount of samples that are made. So there's no doubt about it that we're going to be able to digitalize what we want our garments to look like. And especially this younger generation is going to be much more comfortable with that than the older people who want to see everything. But people can do 3D design now. And the 3D development on washing is taking a while, but it's going to happen. And so basically you'll be able to design a whole jean and you'll be able to sell it from the 3D rendering if you want. The consumers will eventually get used to buying that way, so it looks close to what they think. That saves an enormous amount of time and resources and shipping and freight and carbon and blah, 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 blah. It's wonderful. Also, people will be able to look at fabrics digitally from anywhere at any time. People will be able to shop fabrics from their houses, looking online. People will be able to shop garments like that. And I think, I mean B2B and B2C. So I think digitalization is another full day, but it's coming. It's coming and it's fabulous.
Yes, and again, another class that would need another 3 hours, but we can also talk about software being developed that is emulating the effects that were previously done with chemicals, waters, and whatnot. Well, that's a whole different universe.
There's a whole machinery element too, because now we're using lasers instead of hand scratching or sandpapering. We're using ozone to make things, fade. We have all sorts of, we're using robotics. So there's all sorts of mechanization that's going on that has massive impact towards the environment, positive impact.
Absolutely. And let me tell you to our audience out there, if you haven't digged or researched about this technology, I really invite you to do so because it's super interesting. And if you, for a reason or another, have the chance to see one of these machines operate live, it's a really incredible process. We have a question from Beatrice. She's asking about the recycling water project that you mentioned. If you can share any more information about the type of technology or process that they're using.
Oh, goodness. I need Miguel for that. I'm not going to answer that. I'm not going to answer that because whatever I say is going to be either incomplete or off.
Yeah, but I think, Beatrice, if you have time to join our conversations tomorrow, Miguel is going to be there and we could use that opportunity to ask him about specifics in the process.
Yes.
Okay, so we're almost out of time. So I wanted to ask you, besides, of course, Transformers, what sources of information would you recommend that are reliable? Because I think, and I've discussed this in the past with other speakers, I think sustainability, there's a big complexity to it, and people tend to feel more overwhelmed by the conversation. And I think that, of course, there's a reason we should be worried, but instead of only worrying, we should also actively do things to keep ourselves properly informed. So what sources would you recommend?
Well, what I'd recommend is just learn about one little thing at a time. And not only is it kind of daunting to think about the whole thing, but even if you get into one subject, if you read, for instance, Cradle to Cradle, the books on Cradle to Cradle, even that one book is daunting. So I think that it's best to start with the subjects like farming. You can read about regenerative farming today. Regenerative farming is farming with concern for the soil health. I think it doesn't even matter if it's cotton or anything. It's the same principles. You can read about Cradle to Cradle using products multiple times. I think you can read about, robotics anywhere. And I just think that these are all multi-industry issues, and how they pertain to our industry is is good. But there's a lot of stuff on. And you can go to our Transformers. Honestly, you can go to our transformersfoundation.org website. There's a lot of movies and a lot of interviews with amazing people that teach you about things. So, and you can ask us any questions you want. We're happy to teach. That's what we do. So, you know, I think that's somebody who's interested should get on our foundation website and start going through it. And I think that they should ask for books on particular subjects, and we'll recommend them to you.
Absolutely. And let me tell you, they answer all of their emails. So really take advantage of the fact that there's someone on the other side reading those emails and providing answers. Maybe before we go, I would like to ask you as well, from a personal standpoint, what are your favorite developments happening at the industry right now, or developments that we'll see really grow in the next few years? And then what are your best wishes or your expectations for the industry in the future?
I'm really proud of our industry. First of all, I'll start there, because there's a lot of people doing a lot of things. A lot of money is being spent on doing improvements to factories, and constantly with the idea of using less waste, using less carbon. It's fantastic what's going on. So I'm really proud of our industry. We're really up and at it. And as I say, I'm really in love with the reuse of garbage. It's something every time I hear about it, I'm like, wow, that's so cool. I love it. I'm really excited about the extension of machinery through our business. I'm a little concerned about what it's going to do to a lot of jobs. I think that's a big worry. That's one of my concerns, is jobs in the industry. In a country like Bangladesh, I think 80% or 70% of the workers work in the apparel industry. They have no other jobs. So I don't know how that works out. I don't know what they did before there was apparel, but anyway, that's an issue. And I'm really excited about the whole idea of recycling, that we're recycling fibers and we're recycling garments, and we're recycling. A friend of mine has a factory that makes furniture out of old jeans. He basically cuts it into little pieces, presses it like plywood, and makes wall boards, makes tables, makes chairs, makes children's slides. You can make anything out of anything. So garbage, it's again garbage, but it's the reusing and the recycling is a very huge opportunity for businesses, for people that are creative. There's a lot of raw material for cheap around.
Agreed. A comment from Brenda. She says, it's not a question, it's more of a comment. I think conscious is the key. We have to change the mindset of what we want to buy, everything that is new, and try to search before a purchase all the supply chain or what is behind our products.
Yes, and there's a website that's in conjunction with the UN called Conscious Fashion, and they should look at that.
Absolutely. And maybe before we leave, just a final recommendation for young designers or young industry professionals.
For designers, I ask you please to design things that have a second life at the time you're designing the first life. That's the first thing I would say. And for young people in the industry, try to work for companies that have good values, and try as consumers to support the companies that are authentically doing something great, because their competitors will want to emulate them if you do that. So basically, if you buy conscious and you buy something properly, you create 2 or 3 orders down the line, because the competitors will switch.
Absolutely. Well, I think our time is up. Andrew, I can't thank you enough for the work you're doing, for the marvelous team behind Transformers. I'm truly crazy about the work you do, and it's a true privilege to be able to collaborate to what you're doing. Also to invite everyone at our audience to join our conversations tomorrow and Wednesday at 9 a.m. Mexico until 12. By the end of the talk, you'll see a QR code, and you can register there. With that registration, you'll get a Zoom link at your email accounts.
Yeah, and well, I wanted to thank you in the name of CENTRO. Andrew, thank you so much for this conversation, but also for all the work you've put on with Monica to build Transformers Ed along so many amazing industry experts and everyone. So I obviously ask everyone should be going and listening, because it's inspiring. It's also You get so much knowledge, so much of the good work that's happening. Also, like at this time when it's so difficult to be hopeful, I think that all of these initiatives really do help. And to see what we can do as small consumers in our own life to change stuff. So thank you both very, very much. To all the people, if you didn't register for our event in Eventbrite, please leave your email in any platform, and we're gonna do a follow-up of this conversation. We're gonna add some quotes, some of the recommendations that Monica and Andrew talked about. So please follow us on social media, follow Transformers Foundation, follow Monica, and well, thank you both for being here. It's been a true privilege and a wonderful, wonderful time. It made an hour just fly by with all the great things that we talked about today. So thank you
for having us.
Thank you so much, Con. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.